Indianapolis, 1959. The sacred ground of American motorsport, a place where men gambled their lives in pursuit of speed and glory. But among those brave souls, one man didn't come just to win. He came to challenge the very foundation of racing itself. His name was Henry Smokey Yunick, and the weapon he brought wasn't merely faster, it was backwards. This is the story of a mechanical genius who dared to defy physics, the establishment that tried to stop him, and the shocking truth behind a car so radical it was nearly banned before it ever touched the track. To understand Smokey's rebellion, we first need to understand the world he was about to turn upside down. In the 1950s, the Indianapolis 500 wasn't just a race, it was a kingdom, a high society battleground ruled by a handful of elite car builders who held the keys to victory. At the top sat Avage Watson, whose beautifully crafted Watson Roadsters became the gold standard of the era, fast, graceful, and safe within the boundaries of tradition. The rulebook was treated like scripture, and anyone who dared to question it was seen as a heretic. Then came Smokey Yunick, the man who saw rules as suggestions and convention as a challenge. Smokey wasn't born into racing royalty. He came from Daytona Beach, Florida, far from the glamorous world of the brickyard. A former B-17 flight engineer during World War II, he had learned to survive through quick thinking, innovation, and a refusal to quit. After the war, he brought that same battlefield ingenuity into racing. His shop, famously known as the best damn garage in town, became a temple of unconventional ideas. To Smokey, engineering wasn't about following manuals, it was about finding loopholes in them. In NASCAR, he was already a living legend, a man whose tricks became folklore whispered in every pit lane, like the time his Pontiac overheated at Darlington, and instead of quitting, he built a hidden water tank beneath the driver's seat. With the flip of a valve, the driver could cool the engine mid-race, an innovation so clever that inspectors never even noticed. Or his most infamous move, the extra capacity fuel line. NASCAR limited tank size, so Smokey built an 11-foot-long fuel line that secretly stored several extra gallons of gas. When officials finally caught on and told him to remove it, Smokey unscrewed the line, tossed it over his shoulder, and said, "Make sure you check the tank. It's still legal." His philosophy was simple: if it isn't written in the rulebook, it's fair game. By the late 1950s, Smokey had already conquered NASCAR with more than 50 wins as a crew chief and team owner, but he wasn't satisfied. His next target was the ultimate proving ground, the Indianapolis 500, where reputations were forged in steel and gasoline. In 1958, he debuted the Allhurst Shifter Special, a car that turned heads with its speed and precision. It qualified strongly, but fate wasn't kind. A transmission failure ended his race early. For most men, that would have been the end. For Smokey Yunick, it was the beginning of an obsession. He couldn't stop thinking about one question that no one else dared to ask: what if every car was spinning its engine the wrong way? At Indianapolis, drivers made nothing but left turns, but a conventional engine rotates clockwise, creating a torque effect that lifts the inside tires, the very ones crucial for grip through the corners. That lift caused understeer, instability, and slower lap times. Everyone accepted it as an unavoidable flaw of physics. Everyone except Smokey. His idea was as daring as it was brilliant. Reverse the engine's rotation. Make it spin counterclockwise so the torque pushed the inside tires down instead of lifting them. More grip, more stability, more speed. A direct attack on one of racing's most sacred assumptions. The result was the Reverse Torque Special, a car that didn't just challenge competitors but questioned the laws of motion themselves. Building it was an act of rebellion. Smokey and a handful of trusted mechanics worked out of his Daytona garage under a veil of secrecy. It wasn't a big-money project with corporate sponsors. It was a homegrown effort. Scavenged tools, salvaged parts, and nights fueled by coffee, cigars, and stubborn genius. His team included loyal veterans like Rudy Hooper, young apprentices hungry to learn, and local racers who admired his defiance. The car's foundation was a Curtis Craft 500H chassis, designed by the legendary Frank Curtis, a pioneer of post-war race car design, whose machines dominated Indy through the early 1950s. Smokey bought an old 500 hours chassis, number 715, and immediately tore it apart. He stripped out the independent front suspension, replacing it with a solid beam axle, something purists called madness. But Smokey wasn't building a gentleman's racer. He was creating a mechanical street fighter built to outthink, not outspend, the establishment. Then came the heart of the monster, the Offenhauser engine, or Offie, a power plant that had ruled Indy for decades. Smokey wanted something no one else had ever dared to attempt, an Offenhauser built to run in reverse. He didn't modify an existing one. He went straight to the source, Meyer and Drake Engineering in Los Angeles, the official builders of Offie engines. They produced engine number 210, a perfect mirror image of the standard model. Every component was reversed, the camshafts reground, oil pumps redesigned, firing order inverted, and even the water pump impeller flipped. According to those who saw it, including master mechanic Louis Unser of the famous Unser racing family, it was a masterpiece that felt off in the most fascinating way. It looked identical to a normal Offie, yet somehow unnatural. Like seeing a reflection that blinked back at you, the Offenhauser itself had an incredible history. A direct descendant of the legendary Theomiller engines of the 1920s, designed by Harry Miller and his draftsman Elio Gusin, both pioneers who revolutionized American motorsport with lightweight, high-revving aluminum engines decades ahead of their time. When Miller's company went bankrupt during the Great Depression, his machinist, Wilfred Offenhauser, bought the rights and perfected the design, creating an engine so powerful and reliable it would dominate Indianapolis for nearly half a century. And now, in 1959, Smokey Yunick was about to take that masterpiece, the symbol of tradition and stability, and make it run in reverse. The Offenhauser engine, or Offie as racers affectionately called it, was a marvel of its time. Supercharged versions running on methanol could unleash over 400 horsepower, with sky-high compression ratios pushing 15:1. Each one was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, built with cast iron or aluminum blocks, forged crankshafts, and dry sump lubrication systems. Some even used centrifugal superchargers to squeeze out every last bit of performance. Offenhauser's deep involvement in aviation and marine engineering had shaped its design philosophy, allowing engineers to adapt the same basic platform for multiple purposes. Even eBay reverse rotating configurations, where every internal component was mirrored to spin the opposite way. World War II put racing on pause, but when the engines roared back to life after the war, the Offie evolved into something legendary. In 1946, Louis Meyer, a three-time Indianapolis 500 champion, and Dale Drake, an engineer with experience in aircraft manufacturing, bought the rights to the Offenhauser name from Fred Offenhauser, who was retiring. Together, they formed Meyer and Drake Engineering Co. in Downey, California, a modest workshop that would soon become the beating heart of American racing. Meyer handled the business side and the racers, while Drake oversaw the precision craftsmanship that made every Offie a piece of functional art. Under their guidance, the Offenhauser became the undisputed king of Indianapolis. Between 1935 and 1976, it powered Iowa 27 Indy 500 winner a record that cemented its place in racing immortality. Each engine that left the Meyer and Drake shop was built by hand in small batches, carefully machined, balanced, and tested to perfection. The elite toolroom engines were custom-built for top clients, tuned for specific tracks or driving styles. Skilled machinists meticulously hand-ground camshafts, balanced crankshafts with aircraft-like precision, and ran extensive dynamometer tests to ensure flawless performance. The Offie's greatest strength lay in its e-adaptability. It could run naturally aspirated for endurance or supercharged for raw power, with displacement easily adjusted through bore and stroke modifications. Among its rarest configurations was the EVA reverse rotation engine, something originally intended for twin-engine boats or aircraft, where counter-rotating propellers helped neutralize torque. While unusual for cars, it was technically feasible thanks to the Offie's modular design. Standard Offies spun counterclockwise when viewed from the flywheel, but by flipping camshaft lobes, reversing oil pump gears, and adjusting ignition timing, the engine could just as easily spin clockwise. Meyer and Drake occasionally received special orders for such reverse units, not for show but for experimentation, and engine number 210 would become the most famous of them all. C engine E210 EAU was built under the personal supervision of E. Dale Drake in early 1959. Drake, born in 1910, had mastered the art of precision engine assembly during his time working on aircraft power plants in World War II. He brought that same discipline into racing. Every part of engine TE210 was custom machined. A DIE 255 cubic inch dual overhead cam engine E with hemispherical combustion chambers and a E-Roots type supercharger, delivering between 1.5 and 2 atmospheres of boost. It produced around AO 420 to 450 horsepower EA at 6,500 revolutions per minute with torque. Figures over AWAE 350 pound-feet. Every internal component, from camshaft lobes to oil passages, was mirrored to accommodate the reversed rotation. Even the Scintilla magneto distributor had to be re-engineered to fire in the opposite direction, and the oil system redesigned to prevent cavitation at high RPMs. When the engine finally arrived at Smokey Yunick's Daytona garage, his crew couldn't believe what they were looking at. It looked like an Offie, sounded like an Offie, but everything about it was backwards. Lead mechanic Rudy Hoopery reportedly shook his head and said, "Smokey, they'll laugh us right out of Gasoline Alley." Smokey, ever the rebel, just smiled around his cigar and said, "Let 'em laugh. We'll see who's laughing after 500 miles. And so the beast came to life. A Curtiss chassis powered by a reverse-spinning Offenhauser. A strange hybrid of old-school toughness and radical innovation. When they fired it up for the first time, it didn't rumble like a normal race engine. It whined, producing an eerie, high-pitched note that gave the crew chills. The men nicknamed it the Wrong Way Corrigan and Smokey's Spinning Top. It was both terrifying and mesmerizing. A machine that seemed to defy logic itself. When Smokey rolled into a Gasoline Alley, Indianapolis, the reaction was explosive. The racing establishment split into two camps, those who admired his genius and those who saw him as a heretic. At the center of the opposition was Waj Watson, the master builder whose roadsters had dominated the 500. When asked about Smokey's creation, Watson scoffed, "That's not a race car. It's a carnival ride. It'll hit the wall before lap 50. The scene was set. The conservative perfection of Watson versus the wild innovation of Yunick. Behind the wheel of Smokey's experiment sat a Dwayne "Pappy" Carter, an 11-time Indy veteran known for his calm precision. He wasn't intimidated by the car's odd behavior. In fact, he was curious. During qualifying, Carter clocked an average of 142.8 miles per hour, placing 12th on the grid. Respectable, but what truly impressed observers was the car's handling through corners. Race day was blistering hot. On the opening lap, chaos erupted when several cars tangled in turn 1. While others spun out, Carter's car sliced through the debris with almost supernatural stability. The reverse torque system was working, pushing the inside tires into the track, giving Carter grip where others were slipping. Later, he would describe it to another driver. It felt strange, like the car wanted to push through the turns instead of pulling out of them. But it stuck to the asphalt like glue. Smokey's theory had come to life. As the race wore on, mechanical failures took out many of the frontrunners. One by one, the traditional cars dropped out, and Smokey's backward car just kept lapping consistently. From 12th to 10th to 8th, it climbed through the ranks. When the checkered flag fell, Roger Warda claimed victory in a Watson Roadster. But right behind him, in an astonishing DLA 7th place, was Smokey Yunick's reverse torque special. Against every expectation, it had finished, and finished strong. Yet, as with many of Smokey's inventions, success came with a shadow. The car's reverse rotation solved one problem but created another. The altered torque forces improved corner grip but caused strain on the rear axle, pressing the inside rear tire too firmly into the track. The result was unpredictable handling in longer runs. As one engineer later put it, Smokey fixed understeer by inventing a new kind of oversteer. The performance gain was real but marginal, and the cost of rebuilding an engine in reverse outweighed the advantage. Within months, the racing establishment dismissed the idea as an interesting failure. Watson's camp called it a gimmick. Smokey, undeterred, moved on to his next obsession. The reverse torque special was eventually dismantled, its parts scattered, its legend fading into obscurity. But the whispers never stopped. Some believed the real reason it disappeared wasn't physics, it was politics. Smokey had embarrassed the establishment, and they weren't about to let an outsider rewrite their rule book. Perhaps the reverse torque concept was quietly buried, not because it failed, but because it worked too well. In the end, Smokey Yunick's reverse torque special stood as a symbol of what racing truly is, the constant struggle between innovation and conformity. It proved that even a car built the wrong way could hold its own against the best in the world. And that leaves us with one haunting question. What if Smokey had refined it? What if a well-funded team had embraced his madness? Would the Indianapolis 500 have been ruled not by elegant Watson roadsters, but by the raw, backwards-thinking machines of a Florida mechanic who refused to play by anyone's rules? The truth is, we'll never know. The greatest innovations are often the ones too radical for their time, ideas that dared to show a path the world wasn't ready to follow. So, what do you think? Was Smokey Yunick a misunderstood genius, or a brilliant tinkerer who finally met the one rule he couldn't bend? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And for more hidden chapters of racing history, subscribe and stay tuned. Because here at Garage Legends, we don't just tell who won the race, we tell the stories of the ones who changed it.